Good afternoon. Welcome to, what are we at, April?
April.
Welcome to the April meeting, the Landscape Inspector Association meeting. Thank you all for attending. We hope it's going to certainly be a very good meeting today. We've got 3 very good speakers lined up for you all. So we are going to keep moving. Real quickly, a couple things I want to cover in the business section, and that is we need to make sure, as we said before, that we've got the most current updated email address and contact information for everybody. And we're trying to drive people to our website, because that's where more and more information is coming out, and you can sign up for meetings and you can check your CEUs. We are really encouraging that to happen so we don't get that last minute rush of, oh no, I need to know what my CEUs are, et cetera, et cetera. So please utilize the LIAF website. Very, very easy. As I said before, you can just go on and Google LIAF, and right behind Long Island Alzheimer's Federation, and now the London Animated Institute of Film, we've been bumped again. We're there, so you can log on and check your information. If you have problems when you do, Richard Secor here, he's our IT specialist. Please reach out to him, but try first, following through and keeping an eye on your CEUs, so we're not at the 11th hour rushing around to get to fill in on CEUs. As you know, also, if you attend classes through other associations that have not already requested from LIAF that we issue CEUs to them, you can petition us there's a form available on the website that you can petition and ask, hey, I took this special class, would that be available for an LIAF CEU? So feel free to do that. We need everybody to keep up on those. Speaking of keeping up, we're in April. Make sure you have paid your dues soon. If not, we're going to be sending out reminders, et cetera, et cetera. But don't wait for that. We're encouraging you all as big people to go ahead and get your dues paid. All right. With that being said, because we've got such a great range of speakers today, I want to go ahead and get started with the speakers. So up first is Ms. Sarah Fitzsimmons, and Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you to go ahead and let's see if you can go back to this quickly.
You bet. All right. Well, without further ado, we were just speaking briefly. Sarah was on another call, but as an introduction, Sarah Fitzsimmons has worked at Penn State University with the American Chestnut Foundation since 2003. Assisting chestnut growers and researchers throughout the Appalachian Mountains. Born and raised in southern West Virginia, Sarah studied biology at Drew University in Madison, New Jersey. She then received a master's degree in forest ecology and resource management from Duke University's Nicholas School. After a short stint as an editorial assistant at All About Beer magazine, this is why Bill called you.
That's why I read her first article.
Sarah returned to the forestry field, where she has been ever since. Sarah hopes her research and professional work will facilitate long-term conservation and restoration of native tree species at risk from exotic pests and diseases. So without further ado, Sarah Fitzsimmons, please take the floor.
Thanks so much. And I really appreciate you guys reaching out and your interest in the work that we're doing to restore the American chestnut. So I am going to share my PowerPoint here. Can you guys see that all right?
Now we can. Yes.
Okay. All right, so like my bio said, I've been working with the American chestnut for a long time. I did my master's work on it, and my career, almost 20 years now, has been focused on the species. And so I always say I'm a one species woman, but I also try to see how does this, how do some of the techniques that we're doing within the Chestnut Foundation, both on the scientific side and also in the more sociological side, trying to get people together to be motivated to help this problem. How is that going to spill over into the many other issues that we have facing our native forest tree species? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that too, with a lens, obviously focusing on the American chestnut and what it was and what it is and what we're trying to do to bring it back into the forest. So I'm here at Penn State. I've been here for about 20 years. I go to Florida maybe once a year for various things. Right before the pandemic, on March 13th, 2020, I think I was down in Jupiter Island and in Orlando and just got out before everything kind of went down. So that's my most recent connection to Florida. But most of the, and there are chestnut trees in Florida, and I'll talk a little bit about that too. But the primary range of the American chestnut, it didn't go down into Florida. There's another species called the Allegheny chinkapin that is primarily in Florida, and there's even a Florida chinkapin, and it's a really cool species because it's a trailing chinkapin. It's a dwarf kind of species that has runners. Even though the native range of American chestnut doesn't go into Florida, you can grow them at least down into Orlando, and most of that is because of they love sandy soils. So as long as you have well-drained sandy soils, you can grow chestnut. There's a Chinese chestnut nursery called Chestnut Hill Nursery in Alachua. I think that's in the Panhandle. So you can grow chestnuts and they grow really well. They like the real humid and long growing season of especially central and northern Florida. But for the most part, it's in the center part of the Appalachians. So Maine to Georgia, west into Indiana is the primary range. But like I said, it can grow up into Wisconsin, Minnesota. There's the biggest trees currently are over in Wisconsin. So this species can grow as long as you have nice, well-drained soils. In the heart of its range, it was a major component of the forest. You can see it's a fast-growing timber type species. This person here at the base of this tree, you can see how tall and straight this American chestnut was with no branches up to about 60 foot. It's a very strong self pruner when grown in competition. If it's open grown, you're going to get more of a wolf-like form, like you see in old farm oaks and things like that. So it'll take that form when it's open grown. But it's highly versatile. People called it a cradle to grave species because you could use it for cribs, coffins, and everything in between. So wood products like the split wire fence here in the Shenandoah National Park, this is from their archives. The nuts, of course, you can eat them, the chestnuts roasting on an open fire. I love this picture in the lower right-hand corner, hot chestnuts, good for the brain. That's why I do such a good job, I guess, because I eat them every year, but only the hot ones. But then you can use extracts of chestnut leaves as an antifungal and different kinds of antiseptic properties with the tannins that are in chestnut leaves, and that's still in use today. So lots of social, historic, ecological connections to the species. Again, very highly versatile. I'm going to use the term blight a lot. There's a fungal disease called chestnut blight that we're going to get to here in a minute. But before blight hit the tree, hit the species, there are an estimated 4 billion trees on the landscape. And in many areas, this species was highly densely populated. So this is a picture from, again, Shenandoah National Park, which has a great archive of historical photographs. This picture was taken in 1912. And you can see the tops of these trees look white. And so in late June, early July, all chestnuts, but particularly American chestnuts, produce male and female flowers. The male flowers are what you're seeing here. They're called catkins, and they look like long, yellow, fuzzy pipe cleaners. They also have a very distinctive smell. So the PG rated version of what these things smell like is bleach with a hint of grape Kool-Aid. So it's this very bleachy, strong smell. You can imagine what the R rated versions might be, but very distinctive. You'll never forget what it is, and you can sniff them out. But people would say that the mountains look like they were covered in snow in July. And you can even pick out, these other chestnuts as you get up higher on the mountains. And I also like this picture because you can see where chestnuts preferred to be, which was this mid slope. They can grow lower on the slope, they can grow higher, but they tended to really prefer the mesic areas of these and dryish mesic areas of the mid slope. So a fungal disease was imported in the mid 1800s, primarily on Japanese chestnuts. So American chestnuts were used a lot throughout its native range. You can look at old articles from the 1800s of people going chestnutting. So if you look at New York Times and you look up American chestnut, you'll see people from New York City going up into Connecticut or Eastern PA to go chestnutting in the fall. That was sort of a thing to do. But chestnut. All right, I got muted. So chestnut nuts are very small. They are about the size of a dime. And so while they're tasty and can produce lots of food for humans and wildlife, they're hard to get into. So if you've ever tried to shell chestnuts, it takes a long time. And so there were a lot of people who preferred much larger nuts. And so that would be Japanese chestnut. Japanese chestnuts are the largest nuts in the chestnut world. Hybrids are a little bit bigger, but on their own, Japanese chestnuts are very large. They can be the size of a golf ball. There are cultivars called colossal, which really are colossal, and they're about the size of your fist. They're absolutely jumbo-sized chestnuts. But people were importing these Japanese chestnuts in the 1800s. They're gorgeous trees. You can see these very large Japanese chestnuts on old DuPont estates or in Hershey, Pennsylvania. So New York, New Jersey, PA, you can see these huge Japanese chestnuts. But unfortunately, that's what brought this fungal disease into the US. So chestnut blight is caused by Cryphonectria parasitica, and he has a very distinctive look. It's unlike anything else you'll see in the forests in the Appalachian Mountains. You can see this orange-like sunken canker appearance. That's chestnut blight. So a spore lands on the bark, enters the cambium layer of the tree, and then spreads from there in a circular pattern and eventually girdles the tree and kills the above ground portion. It does not kill the below ground portion. So if there's any of you who love pathology, these are the pictures for you. This is a very happy fungus. You can see the sporulation of this canker all over the tree. But you can see the main stem in the center dead, very, very dead, but then lots of sprouts coming up from the sides. So as you guys have probably seen in many types of hardwood species, these trees can resprout very readily, and chestnut is no exception. So for whatever reason, we've looked into it. We can't find the exact reason. There's some hypotheses out there, but for whatever reason, this parasite cannot infect the root systems. Therefore, this tree can resprout very readily. So while these huge trees in the late 1800s and early 1900s were all completely wiped out, the root systems persisted. And this is what you typically see if you hike the Appalachian Trail or you go into mountains in Alabama, or like I said, even some parts of the panhandle of Florida, you can still see scenes like this. Pale, dead stems in the center of a clump of sprouts. There are an estimated 435 million trees still on the landscape, and that's why American chestnut is not threatened, endangered, or extinct. Because there are so many of these trees, but yet it doesn't do what it's supposed to, right? It's these tiny little sprouts. So 84% of the trees out there are less than an inch in diameter. That's pretty small. They're just kind of hanging out in the understory. We call it functionally extinct. And so our goal with the American Chestnut Foundation and our many partners is to restore function to this species. We want to give it the tools that it can use to fight off this disease, and again, produce the types of functions that it did in the past, which is food for wildlife, food for people, timber for people, all these other great uses that the species used to do. You can see where the species is currently most prevalent. So the mountains of Western New York, Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee up through the Shenandoah National Park. They're all through there. Pennsylvania is absolutely covered. Connecticut, Massachusetts, you can see huge populations of these sprouts, while at the same time, we've lost a lot of the populations in the southwestern portion of the native range. And you can see other places where it's popping up here in the southeast into Georgia and Alabama. Can't quite explain that. That's probably another talk about why we're finding them in places that aren't in the native range. But that's why you can still find trees in Florida, particularly in the Panhandle. But for the most part, the core areas where you find them are the spine of the Appalachian Mountains. And so, a lot of people say, well, who cares? The American chestnut has been gone for over 100 years. It's still in the landscape, but not performing these functions, and everything's fine, right? And I would say, no, not really. Our forests are under threat, and a major issue that we're seeing that, keeps compounding as more and more of our native tree species come under attack is that we're losing the stability of our forests to provide food for the greater food web. And so you think about a species like chestnut and all the services it provides, and then other species that are under threat, like our ashes due to emerald ash borer, or our hemlock due to hemlock woolly adelgid, or our beeches now, where we have 2 or 3 different diseases that are threatening beeches. Our oaks have several different issues that are afflicting them. And you start to compound these issues, it starts to be a really big problem. Deer, which are, especially here in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, deer are really hammering our young seedlings and not allowing them to replace the older trees long term. If you look at chestnut, you've got pollen, you've got over 200 species of caterpillars that feed on chestnut alone, and only American chestnut. Caterpillars tend to be very deliberate in terms of very host specific in terms of what they like to eat. These critters in the middle, they're pretty resilient. They're not the ones that you have to worry about, as long as there are oaks or hickories or other kinds of mass producers that can feed them, turkeys, bears, deer, blue jays. They can eat lots of different stuff, but chestnut provides yet another source of food for them. And there are estimates that we lost 30% of our hard mass production in our eastern forests when we lost chestnut, and oak hasn't been able to produce to make up for that loss. And then over here, why am I showing like fish and larvae? Well, leaves degrade. They produce leaf litter that then aquatic larvae eat, and then what leaves those larvae? Well, that's the fish, and so on and so forth. So you can see how, a singular species, which has lots of impact, its singular loss can be made up for, but with each successive loss, you then have more and more debt that you can't recover. And so, American chestnut, yes, it's important that we restore it, but being able to restore it then gives us hope that we can recover our other species that are also under threat. So when I started this talk, I talked about, well, our science, yes, is a major focus, but we're also focusing on creating that network of people that are involved in the work. We have a very small staff. I cover a range of New Jersey, west into Indiana. We have someone in the South, someone in New England, and then in the Mid-Atlantic, each of which are coordinating all of these people who are a part of this effort. The American chestnut's range is over 180 million acres. We're at 400 million trees, but if we are to get back to that 4 billion, that's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of planting. The American Chestnut Foundation, I work for both the American Chestnut Foundation and Penn State. The American Chestnut Foundation is a nonprofit that was founded in 1983, and its goal is to restore function to the American chestnut and make it part of the forest again, producing food, habitat, et cetera, for people and wildlife. And we do that with tons of different partners, private landowners, the normal people that you think about, Forest Service, National Park Service, lots of academic partners, Penn State, ESF is a primary partner, and I'll focus on them a little bit because they've done a lot of amazing work. And we work internationally too. So I've had the pleasure of going to China a couple times to work with them and their scientists to find ways of recovering blight resistance from Chinese and Japanese chestnuts. So lots of collaboration. We can't do it without lots and lots of people and expertise. So the work that we're doing to try and give American chestnut the tools to fight off the disease is what we call 3-burr. And I really like this acronym because there are 3 chestnuts in a chestnut burr. If you've never seen a chestnut burr, so chestnuts, all chestnuts produce this spiny husk that looks like an urchin. So if you know what a sea urchin looks like, think of a chestnut burr as a tree urchin. And it's very spiny. And inside that burr are 3 round brown chestnuts. And I'll show you a picture a little bit later. But there are 3 chestnuts in a chestnut burr. And this 3-burr acronym, we've got 3 Bs. We've got breeding, biotech, and biocontrol, and they're united for restoration of the species. And so I'll talk a little bit about each of these techniques. And while these are techniques, within each technique, there are lots of different methods under there that we can use to create a stable restoration population. Breeding is what I've spent on most of my time on for my career. It's taking those pollen, those catkins, and breeding it with a chestnut flower. And much like you do corn or soybeans or apples, like people have done for millennia, you do that generation after generation and try to get resistance into the population. So this is a picture from the orchard that I work on here at Penn State. This is the Arboretum at Penn State. You can see tons of trees over here with pink dots. They didn't make it. They didn't make the cut. The trees over here on the right, the bigger ones, they're the ones that we're using for further breeding. We select less than 1% of what we plant through our breeding material. And so that's a lot of planting, a lot of culling, a lot of awesome bonfires, which is my favorite day, to burn all the rogued out stems. And what we're going after are trees that are tall and straight and have this really nice timber form and character so that it can do what the American chestnut does out in the woods while also getting the resistance. And you can see here this canker at the base, and also in this picture previous, what we do is we take the fungus, we put it in the tree. If the tree fights off the fungus, we pick it, it's a selection, and we move it on. And if it doesn't, it gets the pink dot and put onto the bonfire. So that's breeding. The second B is biotechnology. And so biotechnology is really exciting. A lot of people talk about CRISPR and gene editing, and these are all things that we would love to do. So we're working toward that. You know, we're probably 10 or 20 years away from actually being able to use something like CRISPR. That's another talk. But right now, what we're really focusing on with biotech is this insertion of a gene called OXO or OXO. And that gene produces oxalic oxidase. And that's a gene from wheat. And that's really important because what the fungus does, what the chestnut blight fungus does, is produces oxalic acid. That oxalic acid kills the chestnut tissue, and then the fungus can eat it. So it's kind of chivalrous, right, of this fungus to at least kill the tree before it eats it. That's called a necrotroph. And that's actually good because now you're not having to stop or kill the fungus. What you're having to do is now stop the production of that enzyme. And that's what the OXO gene does. The OXO gene neutralizes the oxalic acid that's produced by the fungus. The fungus isn't killed, it's merely neutralized and walled off. And but the process of getting that gene into American chestnuts is called, and you guys can look this up, it's a lot of fun to read about, agrobacterium mediated transformation. And everybody picks on me because I always, every day, I try to find a way, and this is a good way doing presentations, but I try to find a way to say agrobacterium mediated transformation. It's actually a really amazing process, but that's how this OXO gene has been put into American chestnuts, and therefore that technology is highly regulated by several different agencies, including the USDA, the EPA, and the FDA. And so there's lots of different personal philosophies about genetic modification. There are very specific laws and regulations that cover genetic modification. And that's where we're at with this current technology. The most studied clone that contains the OXO gene is called Darling 58. And you can see this here, Darling 58 or D58. This tree has been submitted to the USDA for deregulation. And going through that deregulation process, the USDA, the FDA, the EPA, these are all looking at hundreds and thousands, like literally thousands of pages of information that suggest that Darling 58 is safe, that it can be allowed to be let loose in the landscape. The current regulatory framework says, you can see these on this chestnut tree here, you can see these green bags. You can't allow it to flower. You can't allow it to escape. You can only plant under permit. You can only plant 10 acres. There's lots and lots of these very strict guidelines that surround these genetically modified American chestnut trees. And if they get deregulated, well, then you can plant them. You can plant them wherever you want, however you want. It's very binary. It's either regulated or not. If you want to read up more about all the very specifics, again, thousands and thousands of pages, all of that's public knowledge and on the Federal Register. So to federalregistry.gov, look up Darling 58, and you'll get all of that information. What those information contains is whether or not the species is safe for release, and doing a lot of these different types of ecological studies. So the OXO gene has antifungal properties, right? So it's oxidizing oxidizing oxalic acid or neutralizing oxalic acid. Does it have an effect on other fungi, for example? So looking at colonization of mycorrhizal fungi, transgenic trees have no effect. Mycorrhizae can colonize transgenic American chestnuts just as easily as they do regular chestnuts. All these other studies, do caterpillars eat the leaves the same? Yes, they do. Do bees feed on pollen the same? Yes, they do. Do tadpoles develop the same if they eat the leaves of transgenic for a while? Yes, there's no difference based on all of these studies, and again, all of that's public knowledge. So that's what we're waiting for right now is for those three agencies to make decisions on the safety and deregulation on Darling 58. We hope that'll happen in the fall of next year, but we don't know. That's our best guess of when we'll have an answer from those three agencies. That said, Darling 58 is a clone. Darling 58 is one single tree that also has been put in what we call the Ellis background from northern New York. If I want to take a tree from northern New York and I want to plant it in Maine, or if I want to plant it in Georgia or Florida, will that tree be appropriately adapted for that climate, both now and in the future? And the answer is probably not. And so our goal is not only to get resistance into these trees, but also a wide range of diversity. And our goal is to diversify that Darling 58 and other types of resistance onto at least 1,000 different wild type trees. So we're doing that, and I'm going to cover that here in a little bit more detail. Those are the two Bs. The third B is biocontrol, and there's one primary way that we're looking at biocontrol. There are others, but much like CRISPR versus agrobacterium-mediated transformation, the primary way that we're looking at to control the fungus is something called hypovirulence. And so here on your left is really beautiful, nice, aesthetically pleasing, uninfected, mature American chestnut bark. It looks a lot like tulip poplar bark, if you guys are familiar with that species. When a chestnut tree gets infected by the fungus, this is what it looks like, if the tree can fight it off. So it's this crunchy, crusty, like scabby bark. And that either indicates that the tree has resistance, or the fungus itself is sick. And so you can make this fungus sick by infecting it with a virus, and that's called hypovirulence. And so if you look at again, if there are any pathologists in the room, this is some pretty good photography over here of these white type fungal isolates are hypovirulent. They're infected with the virus and sick. And then the orange isolates are highly virulent. And when you put a hypovirulent strain into the fungus, if you can make the fungus that's attacking your tree sick, then it can reduce the amount of damage that it's doing on a particular chestnut tree. So all of these techniques, these three Bs, the breeding, the biocontrol, the biotech, currently none of them are a singular silver bullet. You've got to really marry all three of these techniques together, and hopefully ones in the future, to create a robust restoration population. And there's a lot of challenges out there. So the American chestnut was first attacked in the late 1800s by Cryphonectria. It was pretty much wiped out by 1950, or at least reduced to this functionally extinct state. Our forests are really different. We've got a lot of different challenges now that we didn't have 100 years ago. Deer populations are higher than they've ever been. At the time when we lost chestnut, deer populations in New Jersey, for example, were at about 10 deer per square mile. They are now, in some areas of Central Florida, over 100 deer per square mile. And that's just impossible to get trees established in that kind of herbivory competition. We've got tons of invasive competitors that weren't there before. Stiltgrass, multiflora rose, bittersweet, honeysuckle, malaminate. Those are our biggest concerns up here. Down there, I know you guys have things like kudzu and all kinds of other stuff that you have to fight against to get trees established in non-treed areas, or even your forests, to try and eliminate them before you can even think about some sort of regenerative properties of that forest. There are other pests and diseases that are here now. Phytophthora cinnamomi, which that's another talk, but Phytophthora cinnamomi is a cousin of Phytophthora ramorum, which is sudden oak death, and also Phytophthora infestans, which was the Irish potato famine. This is a nasty, nasty fungus, or oomycete, that kills chestnuts very, very quickly. Granula ambrosia beetle, Asian longhorn beetle, spotted lanternfly, all of these things were not here in many areas when chestnut went away. And then you think about just the sheer geographic challenge of 180 million acres. How do you even go about starting to reinsert a species across that kind of landscape scale? So what are our next steps? We've got our 3 burr, we've got our several different methods of giving these trees the tools to survive long term. How do we get the stuff back out in the landscape? And again, the answer is partnerships and collaborations. It's going to take people planting trees everywhere at every chance that they get. And so that's why I want to show these pictures of just the hundreds and thousands of people that are involved in this effort currently and will be in the future. excuse me. So here's where we found American chestnuts here on the right. So if a county is green, we found tons of American chestnuts there. If they're orange or pink, we haven't found all that many. But you can see we have pretty good coverage from a diversification standpoint. We don't have a lot of trees from Ohio, Indiana, or Mississippi, these extreme edges of the range. We'd love to find more trees to diversify our material, but the harder the range, we've got covered pretty well. The reason I wanted to show this was because that's where our American chestnuts are, our wild American chestnuts. Wild American chestnuts are still out there. Like we said, 84% of them are 1 inch in diameter or less, and most of them are highly blighted. That said, there's still reason to plant American chestnuts. This is a chestnut orchard in Maine. These are wild American chestnuts. That's Eric Evans there in the orange hat. American chestnuts can grow very fast, and they can grow pretty big until they get hit by the blight. So these trees got to be about 20 years old before they got the blight. Blight can strike chestnuts at any age. It can even infect the nuts. It's mainly a matter of luck and statistics. So most trees will get infected between age 8 and 15, but some will make it to 20. Some make it a little bit longer, but not usually. But it's pretty cool to watch these American chestnuts grow in many areas. And you can see this is one tree that Eric cut down that had eventually got the blight. This was this past fall. And you can see the growth on these trees. On a good site, American chestnuts can average 1/2 inch to 1 inch diameter or more of growth per year. So they can grow very fast where they're happy. There's also American chestnuts out there that have resistance themselves. So these trees all look like they have hypervirulence, but they don't. This is all native resistance in these trees. I like to show these pictures because that's my daughter, Parker. I have to drag her on a lot of these trips, especially in the summer. So this is Parker and the Wobridge tree, which is up in Erie, Pennsylvania. This is Jay Brenneman. Jay says if he knew I was going to use this picture in my talks, he would put on a different outfit for our trip that day. But this is the Ort tree in south central Pennsylvania, and this is the Thompson tree with Tom Scieli down at the base of it. And you can see these trees, they're gnarly, they're not that beautiful single stem, but there's resistance in these native populations that we can build in to reintroduction and restoration populations. And again, just to kind of show you what we're looking at in terms of the resistance that we have. So you get these resistance, you have to work together with lots of people to make lots of trees. I'm going to skip that. And then you got to get them out in the landscape. And that's just a huge job. The native range, so this area marked out in red, is 180 million acres. The amount of suitable habitat certainly extends beyond there. We have trees in Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana. Again, there's some slightly possibly suitable habitat down in Florida where you have sandy soils. If you look at a lot of different types of metrics, the amount of suitable habitat where we can reintroduce chestnut is 100 million acres. That's a lot of land. How do we figure out how to get these trees back in the landscape? What's the minimum number of trees that you should put into what you call a reintroduction population? And most of what we know about that, because the tree was gone before we started asking some of these questions, most of what we know about that are from these populations that I'm showing on this map. West Salem, Wisconsin is the primary one. These locations outside of the native range were able to create these naturally regenerating populations for some amount of time before they got blighted. So here's pictures from the West Salem, Wisconsin stand. What happened was a farmer from Pennsylvania actually stuck 9 seeds in his pocket, moved west, settled in along the Mississippi River there in Wisconsin, planted their trees. This is what they looked like when they got to be about 100 years old. And then he managed for chestnut expansion. And so out of 9 trees, you ended up with 30 acres of American chestnuts. And we got a lot of data and a lot of information about how the species spreads on its own from this stand. Unfortunately, blight has hit it. It's now completely toast, but we learned a lot. What we learned by studying this, I'm using the royal we, I did not do this. What scientists learned was, and then finally analyzed by some software. So this is Steve Rogstad and Pelican. They published these results using a model they call New Garden. It's a software package. Based on information of data studied at West Salem, they say in order to get a robust reintroduction population, you need to plant 300 trees. That will get you to about 169 trees that are breeding together, and that'll give you a great allelic diversity. So we start there. So if we want to make a reintroduction population, let's put at least 300 individuals in an acre or maybe a 5-acre area if you're planting with other species. The thinking is that you're going to get about half of those survive, and they're the ones that are going to be breeding and giving you your ultimate restoration population. All right, so if with that as a start, now we know how many seedlings we have to produce to make. So, okay, well, I need to make 300 seedlings to make one reintroduction population. So we know how to grow seedlings in pots. We know how to grow seedlings. This is a picture from Valonia Nursery in southern Indiana. They grow just absolutely gorgeous seedlings. There's lots of nurseries. This picture is from Penn Nursery here in central PA. Lots of seedlings are grown throughout the US. There are 1.2 billion seedlings grown in the eastern US every year. 82% of that is in the South, 75% is bare rootstock. I'm sure for you in Florida, you guys can figure out what most of that is. Only 5% of those seedlings are hardwood because 1 billion of them are pine, and most of that is loblolly pine because it's a highly, lucrative species. So of those 1.2 billion seedlings, only 5% are hardwood trees. So only 22 million trees are hardwoods. 67% of those hardwoods produced in the East are oak. So you can see, well, we've really reduced the capacity of just production of hardwood species. So how's chestnut going to fit into that scenario? So let's say at some point we can produce 2 million trees, 2 million American chestnuts per year. I'll let you know that the most production we've ever had for American chestnuts in 1 year is 150,000. So that's a far cry from 2 million. But let's say our goal, we at some point, and I'm hoping within the next 20 to 30 years, we can produce 1 million and even maybe 2 million seedlings per year. Let's say that we set that goal. At some point, we can reach 2 million seedlings per year at planting 300 trees per acre, and we can expand that, but let's just, let's run some numbers. If we plant 300 trees per acre, we can cover 4,000 acres per year. Well, that'll take us 250 years to plant 1 million acres, and that would represent 1% of suitable habitat. And so, I've had a couple people say, Sarah, why do you always say that? That's really depressing that it's going to take us that long to reintroduce the species. And I say, well, we can produce more than 2 million seedlings. That's what that says to me, is that we have to set our goal a little higher, or we have to set our planting goals a little higher. This just gives us a starting point of what kind of production we need to see and what kind of scale we need to be at to start thinking on a landscape scale basis. And that doesn't mean, I'm not advocating that we need to plant 180 million acres or the entirety of suitable habitat. We're only going to plant some percentage of that because I ain't planting in this. This is some habitat where we have planted. We actually planted with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. This is Allegheny wood rat territory, which is another endangered species. What I want to do is plant in the valley at the base of these rock piles, and then have the wood rat or blue jays or whatever grab those seeds and plant up in these rock piles. Chestnuts love these rock piles. Allegheny wood rat really love American chestnut, as do other species, but we're going to rely on them for dispersal, for the greatest amount of dispersal. So is 1 million acres how much we should shoot for planting? 1% of suitable habitat. That's some of the kind of numbers that we still have to run. That said, we have time. Even if we double that or increase our production double or decrease the amount of suitable acreage we want to plant, we have time. I'm going to skip all that. I'm so sorry. We start thinking about this timeline. If we want to produce 2 million trees per acres, how long is it going to take us to get to that minimum, standard? And what's going to happen in that timeline? So let's say we get Darling 58 deregulated in 2023. We can start planting en masse. Our best breeding material, we can deploy hypervirulence across a huge amount of acreage. We're all hands on deck for planting. I estimate that in the next 40 years, by 2060, we could probably plant 50,000 acres, as long as we're producing 1 million seedlings by 2040 and 2 million seedlings by 2060, which means we got to produce a ton of seed orchards here now to get to that kind of production. So even if, that's a minimum goal. I think that's an easily reachable goal. I'd love to exceed that. But what this tells me is that there's lots of technology coming in behind what we have now that's going to help us either improve resistance on the back end, that's going to help us improve the way that we introduce chestnut into the landscape, that hopefully will help us improve efficiency of planting and artificial regeneration that we're doing. And eventually we'll get to lots of trees in the landscape that look like this. American chestnuts producing chestnut burrs. So here's a good picture of these tree urchins that are self-sustaining in the landscape. So that is the real broad overview of what the chestnut used to be, what happened to it, and what we're doing to try and get it out into the woods. I am Sarah, S-A-R-A, at acf.org, or you can just Google the Chestnut Lady at Penn State, and I'm sure you'll find me. And if we have time, I'm happy to answer some questions, or you can email me later.
Hey, Sarah, fantastic information. Yes, I've got a bunch of questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
First of all, the one that was questioned was about climate change and the impact, since it would be, you showed that picture where the chestnuts are happiest on the hillside. How has climate change positively and or negatively impacted the chestnut tree and the chestnut blights and situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So something we think about a lot. What we're seeing is that chestnut, so I showed you that picture of where we see chestnut today, and a lot of that southwestern edge of the range is being eroded, and a lot of that is because of changing climate. It's not entirely because of changing climate, but a lot of that is because of changing climate. We are seeing loss of chestnut at lower elevations. They can't move on their own, so they're not moving to higher elevations or moving to higher latitudes. But as we think about how we're going to reinstall American chestnut, that's first and foremost at our mind. We need to, so if we want to diversify our disease-resistant populations on 1,000 American chestnuts, let's say I get a bunch from Georgia, a bunch from, from low elevation and high elevation, a bunch from North Carolina from low elevation and high elevation. How am I then going to decide where I put those diversified trees? So do I take trees from high elevations and only put them at high elevations? Or do I take some percentage of trees from low elevations or low latitudes and move those a little bit further north? So you got to kind of think of how, not only what the seed zone and seed matching is for today, but what it is 20, 40, or even 80 years into the future. And how much do we want to go back into these reintroduction populations and plant later to account for climate change? So those are all the kinds of models that we're thinking about. Now our materials are not fully diversified at this point to where it really makes a whole lot of difference, but it makes a lot of difference in terms of how much work we have ahead of us to do in terms of the regionalization and then ultimate deployment of all these materials.
Next question, with the loss of them, because you said there was such an extensive portion of the forest that were covered by them initially, and they've been lost over the years, what tree species have moved in to fill those voids?
It's primarily oak. And so, it was a oak, hickory, chestnut forest was primarily what you had. And then as chestnut was lost, then you had oak move in there. And like I said, a lot of, there's at least 2 different studies that showed that American chestnut, when we lost American chestnut, we lost 30% of our mass production, which oak has not been able to make up for. And so while oak has great acorns, and acorns are awesome, and lots of wildlife feed on them, it has not been able to match the productivity of the chestnut that came before it.
Understood. So the rate of growth of the oak is also slower, if I understand, because you were saying chestnut's a pretty fast grower.
It can be. Again, it's highly dependent on the habitat and the location. I mean, there are oak species that will outgrow chestnut on like wetter sites, because chestnut doesn't like wet sites. But if you put a chestnut, on a ridge top around here, just as an example, here in central Pennsylvania, if I go to a ridge top and I got tons of chestnut oak and I got American chestnut will far outgrow chestnut oak, probably double, if not more. on a site like that.
Another question, the replacements, the seedlings that you're growing, you're getting, if I heard you correct, you're primarily getting those from selections
Correct.
that have survived the field. And then you're once they are approved to go to breed and cross-pollinate, when you know, genetics 101 to me, but when they cross-pollinate, isn't there a chance you're going to lose that trait that you selected it for?
So it depends on the trait that you're passing along and how you're crossing them. So blight resistance from Chinese chestnut, which is what we're using in our traditional breeding programs, is highly complicated. If it were just a straight Mendelian dominant recessive kind of trait, yeah. So if I have dominant recessive, I mix together, I dilute it by half, you know, on and on. It's a quantitative trait and much more complicated. So if you take trees, and we're still wrestling with that to figure out exactly how to bring all of those blight resistance genes in alignment. So that's a separate, much more complicated story. The OXO gene is different. So the OXO gene, which has been inserted through genetic modification, is there or not, and it's on or not. So as long as the tree has one copy, it's resistant. If it has two copies, it's the same amount of resistance. The difference is that if you have a tree with one copy, it's going to make kids that, and it breeds with a tree that doesn't have any copies, then it's going to make half its kids have a copy and half of its kids not. So you got to go to that next generation. If you have a tree that has both copies, then all of its kids have resistance. So yeah, you got to think about what generations you deploy and how you deploy them, and what's the tolerance of the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that to have high enough allelic frequencies that it can remain in the population long term.
That leads to my next question. Have you all looked, or has anybody spent any time thinking what CRISPR could do with these?
Absolutely. We would love to be able to edit and use CRISPR. So CRISPR, right now, it's a lot easier to knock something out than it is to add something in. And so what we're doing right now in terms of CRISPR is looking at areas of the genome where we might be able to say, is there some sort of, I'm going to call it a susceptibility gene. That's not exactly what it is, but is there something that we could get rid of in American chestnut that will make it more resistant? At the same time, we're also looking for stuff that could be added in, but that with the technology the way it is right now, it's a lot more difficult to add things in than it is to knock things out. Who knows what that technology is going to look like in another 10 or 20 years? You know, we've got the full genome of American chestnut sequenced. That's a great step. We're doing a lot of gene discovery work to try and figure out what these genes are and what they do so that we could edit them in the future. So I think we're probably 10, 20 years away from really realizing the application of that technology, but we're working toward it.
So there's CRISPR research being done on the American chestnut?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. I mean, it's expensive, and we'd love more people to do more work on it, but it has started.
Excellent. There's a question from Greg Pelladora, and he says, has suppression of fire in the urban interface impacted the chestnut? Does it need fire? So he's saying, in other words, does chestnut rely on fire to clear out competitive species?
I wouldn't say it relies on it, but based on some historic information that we have and a few small studies, I'd love to do some bigger studies. But on the few small studies that we have, yes, chestnut responds very well to fire. It's a highly disturbance dependent species. And because it can grow really fast, like you can, so you saw how they coppice, right? You saw how they can resprout from the base. So if you had a really medium intensity fire or even a high intensity fire that didn't kill that root system, as long as that root system stays intact, it can grow. I mean, I've seen chestnuts from coppice grow 7 to 10 feet tall in a year. So these things can grow tremendously fast, and I've seen it outcompete birch and tulip poplar in some really nice mesic sites. It can't in like the nice moist bottomlands because chestnut doesn't like those sites as well. But in these mid-slope, high slopes, chestnuts will, especially from coppice, just run all the competition. So fire, we're definitely looking to that as a easier tool. And I know in Florida, you guys are really adept at using that tool. Here in Pennsylvania, so what do you guys do? You guys do like hundreds of thousands of acres every year. I think we do something like 2,000 acres per year of fire in Pennsylvania. And so it's becoming more of a useful tool. And there's a lot of, regulatory aspects to that. We hope that our colleagues on that end of things will make fire more accessible so that it can be used for reintroduction in the future.
Excellent. Interesting. Last month we had a speaker from the Florida Native Plant Society, and they were talking about a tree down here, the Florida torreya.
Ah, yes.
It similar has a disease that's driving it out of existence. It's effectively extinct. What they were saying, or one of the things they're pursuing, was do not replant it. They're trying to pull seedling samples and stuff up to like the Atlanta area out of its natural growing range, and they're trying to see if they can almost just allow the tide to pass and almost allow these torreya to die, and then bring back the ones later on to see if they can, almost like COVID, just get over it.
Right. Yeah. I've heard that. So that's a big debate in the conservation community as to whether or not that's an effective strategy. And for a lot of these, it's the only strategy, right? I've talked to some folks who are working with coral, and in for example, in the Caribbean, there are Caribbean coral species which are effectively being lost to time. And so the question is, well, can we bring coral from the Pacific and plant that in the Caribbean? And it's like, well, at this point, it's either Pacific coral or no coral. So let's just do it, And I think with torreya, it's kind of the same thing. Like, is it ethical or whatever to move torreya that far north where it's not really native? And it's like, well, we either have torreya or we don't, because at this rate, it's just going to completely disappear from the entire habitat. So yeah, torreya is a really, really big, and it wasn't nearly as plentiful. Like I feel for those guys, because that's a very niche species with a very much smaller population than we have to work with. And yeah, just save it, by all means, and see if you can deal with it later.
Excellent. We have a question from Donna Castro, and she's saying, is there any hypothesis on why this blight is attracted to chestnuts, and does it affect any other trees?
We're actually looking at that. So we've got a great evolutionary molecular ecologist at Virginia Tech looking at that exact question. What is it about chestnut blight that it just decided to like chestnut? So the center of origin for Castanea as a genus and Cryphonectria as a genus is China. So, Chinese chestnut, Castanea mollissima, and Cryphonectria, grew up in concert in China. And at some point, Cryphonectria decided, hey, this looks like something I could eat. And, Chinese chestnut started to figure out ways to combat that, right? And then if you look at the evolutionary history of Castanea, you can see that there's this Western migration. So Chinese chestnut then begat European chestnut, then begat American chestnut. So is it then that American chestnut lost this resistance that Chinese chestnut had? So that's a question that we're really wrestling with. Can we look at Cryphonectria and see if there's some sort of mechanism that it uses to become a parasite? Like, it can just persist as a saprophyte, but what makes it then become a pathogen? So what are the pathogenicity traits that we might even be able to CRISPR out of the fungus? So those are things that we're looking at, very complicated. Similarly, the genome of Cryphonectria has been fully sequenced, and we may be able to find like some sort of silencing mechanism that we can get rid of the pathogenicity from there. But yeah, at this time, we don't know the exact answer to that question, but it would be helpful to know it.
You feel like you're winning this battle, losing this battle, maintaining? Where are you at in this?
I feel like we're making progress. I think it's a lot like any of these really complicated diseases, even in humans. You look at something, and I don't want to put chestnut blight on the level of like cancer in humans, but if you look at, we haven't cured it. Many things we have been able to make really amazing progress, but there are some others where you see this incremental progress against these diseases. We're absolutely there with chestnut blight. We're making it even since the 19 teens, I didn't mention in the 1950s, there was an effort to irradiate resistance into chestnut. Like literally people would just throw a handful of chestnuts into a nuclear reactor in hopes that it would mutate up some resistance. And it did. Like there are mutagenic populations in Maryland and some other locations that have some incremental resistance, which is better than full susceptibility. So what I see is we've got populations that have really good resistance, that have American character. We are restoring function. There's a lot of challenges that we still have to overcome and that we're facing, but we've definitely made progress, and we're better than where we were even 30 years ago when the Chestnut Foundation started.
A zombie chestnut, that's interesting.
Right?
Is there companies, large corporations and things that would benefit from the wood? Because you said initially, the American chestnut was cradle to grave. It was used for everything. If it had a value to the paper products and such, are there large scale companies that could get behind and boost the research with dollars?
I think so. I mean, I think in my experience, we have had some smaller scale timber company. I mean, West Veco, we had some plantings with them, Georgia Pacific, as they change names too, it's still on their land. They've had some interest, not a whole lot of dollars that have gone behind it, but they've helped fund some plantings, some individual plantings. I see, they put a ton of effort, paper companies especially, put a ton of effort into tree improvement in the 70s and 80s. And by the 90s, they had pretty much just completely done away with those R&D programs because they're so expensive, and pretty much outsourced it to academic institutions. So if you look at Lob Pine, pretty much all or a lot of that improvement is done in the academics. Arborgen is a company that's doing a lot of tree improvement now, and they're really heavily focused on pine, although they dabble in like sweet gum and stuff. So I think if and when we get to a point where chestnut is dependably growing, they would get behind it at that point. But it's such a large investment of resources. They don't where the payoff is unknown and the time of that payoff is unknown, it's really hard to convince them to make that investment at this point. But I think eventually they would.
Interesting. Well, Sarah, I can't thank you enough. That was fantastic. You obviously have a passion for this particular species, but trees in general, and your presentation was excellent.
Well,
we really thank you. If there's ever anything landscape inspectors can do for you, you've got my contact information. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for your interest, and this is a group of folks that I've never had contact with, so I really appreciate you making the connection, and yeah, hope we can stay in touch and that our paths cross again.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
All right, all landscape inspectors, stay on, yes, and please let Matt in. Again, because of we've got a very full agenda here, so I'm going to go ahead and keep moving. You got John on there. There he is. John is a co-host. So John was good enough to quickly step in and help us here. And of course, John's been a member and been with us for, wow, John, 10 years I'll throw out there, but I think it may even been longer. So John, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. You can introduce and take it from there.
All right. Thank you so much, Bill. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Good afternoon to everyone. And I appreciate the opportunity this afternoon to provide an update from 811. Yes, my name is John Segovia. I'm the South Florida Safety Education Representative for 811. And I'm going to provide an update on some important changes that involve the 811 process and, of course, the state law that we're based on, which is Chapter 556. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my presentation. And so you guys can follow along. Okay, let's see here. And hopefully you're able to see the slides there. Okay, So I'm the South Florida Safety Education Representative, and it's been a while since I've talked to this group, but I definitely miss seeing everyone at the meetings. Been joining some of the calls that you've had, and I've had the opportunity to present at these meetings before, at your monthly meetings in Broward, and also to Landscape Inspectors Association of Florida, Miami-Dade chapter as well. But just to go over basics of Sunshine 811 and what, who we are and what we do and so forth. We are based on state law chapter 556, and it was created back in 1993. And the law was put together. It was a huge undertaking by utility companies. They banded together to work with legislative there in Tallahassee to put together a law to protect underground infrastructure and to have a system in place as other states started have a system in place as well, or started doing the same thing for protection of underground, to notify the system, which would be us, and we got created because of chapter 556, to notify before any type of excavation work in Florida or any type of demolition work. So the state law created our company. We're a not-for-profit private company based out of Central Florida. We used to be in South Florida when we first, everything started, and then they moved to Central Florida. Of course, I work down here in the South Florida area. I actually live in Broward County, and I handle the South Florida area as part of my territory. But Chapter 556 created Sunshine 811 in the state law. It indicates that member utility operators or utility operators that own, maintain underground lines that are active need to be members of the 811 system. And that's what we refer to as member operators. So they own underground facilities. The law also talks about excavators are required to notify prior to excavation or prior to demolition. And then the member operators are required to locate and respond. So we have over 1,000 here in the state of Florida that are member operators. And they go through a process where they fill out an application, provide us in contact information. They also go into our base map and put in their service areas. And that's how we know to notify them based upon an address information that's provided to us by an excavator, whether it's a homeowner that reaches out to 811 or a professional excavator that reaches out to 811. Sunshine 811 does not mark any lines at all. We're primarily the notification system that notifies those member utility operators so they can dispatch a locate technician to the site and mark the line. So you have seen probably the flags and the paint in your neighborhood or all around town. That means that someone did notify 811 because they're planning to dig. So it alerted the utilities so they can go and send out a locate technician to mark to identify what's below. And that's the whole purpose of this, is to know what's below to avoid hitting something, also to keep you safe. Those workers that are out there, keep them safe, and also keep the community safe as well. Is very important. So this process can be a life-saving system that's in place. So that's why we always have to talk about it, especially here in Florida, to talk about the importance of notifying 811. If you have not been to our website, please visit our website, sunshine811.com. It got revamped not too long ago. In our website, you'll find lots of free education information. There's a section for homeowners, as many homeowners notify if they're working on their property. They notify 811. Maybe they're changing their or putting in a mailbox or installing a pool or having some fence work done. Maybe they're doing the work themselves, installing trees, taking out trees, putting in bushes, any type of landscape work. Or they may hire someone, and there's a professional excavator section as well. Many stakeholders It can be a landscape. It can be someone doing underground construction work. It could be a plumber. It could be a fence contractor. So we have an excavator section as well in our website with lots of information there as well. And then we also have an online store at the bottom of any of our pages on our website where anyone can go and order free resources on 811. Right now, we are in the middle, we're in the process of transitioning to a new online store that's going to be available within the coming weeks. We're going to have lots more materials that you can order from that new online store, including banners, stickers for hard hats. We're going to have Spanish material as well as English material. So that's coming soon. That we'll be transitioning to the new online store. But just like a call to 811 to have utilities marked, public utilities marked in the site where you're digging is a free service. Our resources and our education is free as well. So I mentioned that this is a free service, but who funds this program? It is funded by the utility members of 811. Those over 1,000, as I mentioned, here in the state of Florida, they fund this program and this system of notification. We are in April and almost to the month of May, but it is Safe Digging Month, and actually not just in Florida, but nationally. So we recognize April as National Safe Digging Month. It's especially for our northern neighbors, and I actually grew up in Pennsylvania in a little town called Allentown. It's not so little anymore. So I know that growing up with the snow and all that, we'll look forward to the springtime. So the designated April springtime for everyone around the country to, as you go out and start digging and doing your projects, be aware of 811, and you can help spread awareness of 811. We've put together a toolkit, which you can find at sunshine811.com/toolkit. And there's lots of information there in that toolkit that you can utilize and take to spread awareness. And here in Florida, you know, we got the great weather, so there's digging taking place all year long. We don't get a break in excavation work. This is a message that we're talking about 365 days a year. But in that toolkit, you can find some infographics. There's also news release, social media verbiage that you can utilize and take to help spread the message, web banners, and also a proclamation wording is there. So I know we've passed a time frame for this year, but if you want your city to do a proclamation for next year of April of 2023, you can utilize that proclamation wording through the city council. And if that city does proclaim a proclamation for next year, let us know. Let me know if there's an opportunity that I can speak and be there at the city council meeting to accept the proclamation and to say a few words. I would love to do that as well. So this is the team that I am, a small team here at Sunshine 811. And of course, I'm South Florida, from Indian River County down to Monroe County is my territory, and also Collier and Okeechobee. I'm also bilingual, so available to provide education in Espanol to anyone here in the state of Florida. Kathy Thrash is in Central Florida. Brian is West Coast. Brad is North Florida. So we all live out and work remotely in our regions, and we have our own counties that we handle. Sunshine 811's office is based out of Central Florida. Our call center is there. We have a call center that operates Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And those folks have been working remotely for the past 2 years. But we're still in operations. We've never shut down. And then we have other folks that are out of Central Florida as well. Our company, or Sunshine 811, has board members. They're really comprised of utility members, and we have a contractor that sits on our board. They meet every quarter as well, and those meetings are open to the public. I know they've been holding those meetings virtually, but I think they started doing them face-to-face just recent. One thing that as I mentioned, we haven't stopped during this time period, well, the past 2 years. We've noticed over the past 2 years that ticket volumes have been going up here in Florida, and we've had some record notification volumes recent. These are the top 5, and as you can see here from the dates, they're all within the last few months. Highest total tickets. On March 7th, we had close to 11,000 tickets that day. So this means that there's a lot of work taking place out there, and more people know about 811, and they're following the law and trying to stay safe. Whether it's word of mouth or they saw it on a web banner somewhere, or it was a radio that they heard, or a TV ad, or maybe it's word of mouth, or maybe they hit something and they became aware of 811. Whatever the cause, the method, we know that folks are notifying 811 and know about it. They're getting more educated on the process, and that's a good thing. One of the things that we started over the past few years, because of the COVID, we started webinars, 2 per month. And the first Wednesday of each month, we're doing a statewide task force call. It's open to any stakeholder to join. We try to have a different topic or a speaker, and it's from noon to 1:30. The last call we had was talking about protecting Florida's pipelines from digging damages, and we had several utility companies, pipeline companies that were part of that meeting. So again, that's the first Wednesday at noon, and then the second Thursday at noon is our practical solutions to safe digging, where we spend more time with the 6 steps to safer digging. I'll talk briefly about that on this presentation, but we focus more on the 6 steps to safer digging, and we go through some scenarios and practical solutions, best practices, and so forth. So this is open to anyone to join these calls. You can register. If you subscribe to our newsletter or email list, that's the best way to know about these meetings that we're hosting. Or maybe there's a special meeting that we're going to have later on this year, for example, and you'll be in the know if you're in our email list. So how do you sign up? Just subscribe at sunshine811.com. At the bottom of any of the pages there, you can subscribe and also select the preferences of the information that you want to receive from us as well. So this is what we're trying to avoid. I'm not sure if you're going to hear the audio on this video that I have here in the slide, but this is Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, July of 2018. A third-party contractor was doing fiber installs there in the center of town, and they hit a gas pipeline. And this is after first responders were at the scene. Okay, and I'll go ahead and play the video. It's a mass explosion there. It was a 4-inch gas line that was hit by the contractor. And unfortunately, there was a person that did lose their life, and many others were hurt as well, had to go to the hospital. But a family lost, a husband and a father, and they investigated. And of course, in Wisconsin, as well as all the other states here in the US, there's a state law in each state that talks about notifying 811, and there's personnel, folks that administer the 811 system in every state, just like we here in Florida. So they investigated and found out that the contractor had not notified 811. And if they, of course, would have notified 811 and gone through the process, they would have known that there was a gas line there. Okay, and that line was probably a critical or high pressure gas line that would have been identified maybe with a special code. So all that could avoid it, that loss of life. We can never replace a life, as we know. You can replace other things, material things, but not a loss of life. We're trying to avoid that from happening here in Florida. We want to keep people safe. We always say, go home safely. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. So we've always got to talk about 811. And then this is actually closer to home here. No one got killed here, but This is an event that happened July 2019 here in the city of Fort Lauderdale, where there was a third party contractor doing work for a major utility company, actually did notify 811, but provided a wrong address information, didn't provide enough details of what they were doing. And they struck a 42-inch water main that belongs to the city of Fort Lauderdale. And it was about a couple hundred feet from where they had indicated on their ticket. And of course, this water main brings raw water to a plant that's nearby that goes out to several cities. So when that line got damaged, it affected several cities. Maybe you saw the media, or maybe you experienced a water loss yourself, but this lasted for several days. So shift now to December of last year. There was a court case and a jury that made determination that that contractor was found guilty and not doing the right things here and not providing the details that were needed, the correct address and so forth, and they're 98% at fault in this situation. So stay out of the headlines, contact 811, do the right things. I think I have another picture here of that water main from 2019 there in Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport. Again, that could have been avoided as well if they provided the details. Just a couple hundred feet can make a huge difference. And when you're talking about underground utilities, you got to provide as much details as possible. And of course, provide the correct address that would have alerted the city to probably have a discussion before any digging took place to protect that water main, that critical water main that was underground there. The law, state law, chapter 556 does define excavation and demolition. Anything that moves dirt, regardless of whether you're using a hand tool or machine, regardless of how deep you're digging, if you're planning to disturb the surface of the earth, penetrate, change the grade, you need to notify beforehand. And demolition is also defined in the state law. Demolishing part of a structure on a property or the full structure, before you do that, you have to notify 811 as well. Keeping communications and 911 working. A lot of folks still work remotely and will be working remotely. So they rely on that internet to be working, that phone lines need to be worked. So these are lines that need to be protected. We have also, as part of this service, we provide capabilities for a stakeholder to, instead of calling 811, going online and submitting a ticket request. And if you want to utilize our online ticket system called ExactTix, you have that option. Now you don't need any training to do a single address, and you can do that right off of our website. If you just want a single address located, many homeowners do that. But if you're doing intersections, multiple addresses, and you prefer to do your tickets online instead of picking up the phone and call, then you can sign up to use ExactTix, and you're required to go through training as well. So it's an online training course that you have to take. And we also help you and monitor your tickets at the beginning as well, and help you in case you have any questions. But we've put out some tutorials for the ExactTix on how to do certain things. And we have a YouTube page, Sunshine 811. You're welcome to go out there as well and look at those videos. Maybe you're a person that does use our ExactTix system. Please take a look at those videos. They're professionally done. They're short and sweet, to the point, talking about, adding attachments to tickets, how to use the mapping tools, and also talking about how to register to use the system. This is another page I want to highlight. It's an online tools page, my.sunshine811.com. And if you have access to go in and do tickets online, you can go here to sign in, create your tickets, check responses on your tickets. You can also access those videos that I was talking about. That'll take you to the YouTube page. The internet ticket entry application is to get that whole process started. If you want to do your tickets online, our Coursetra is our online education page, and you have to create a login or sign into that page in order to take the course if you're going to be doing tickets online. we're talking about this slide here is very important because you have your foremen, your supervisors, your project managers that go out to the sites, and they're verifying responses on locate tickets, and communicating that with the boots on the ground. If those folks have a tablet or a smartphone or laptop out there and with internet access, then they can register with Exactis to look up their company tickets and also check responses in real time. So the same place you go to log into the system to get registered, you would go to sign up next to no account, and then fill out the new user registration. Use your company ID, and we assign a company ID to anyone. First time callers to 811, if you're a company, we assign a company ID to you. So you can get the company ID from whoever does tickets at your company, or you can call 811 and we can provide that information to you. But this is a great way to stay on top of your tickets, check responses in real time, check any locator comments. A locator may have put some comments out there. And it's always important to verify. That's part of the 6-step process. It's important, especially if you need to communicate with the locator, or if the locator is trying to communicate with you, they may put comments out there, or there's a code that they'll use out there. So that's why it's important to verify. So this is just one method of doing that. We recently revised our reference guide for excavators to Spanish. So it's available now. I've been taking it out to the meetings that I've been doing recently. I did meetings with Dixie Landscape not too long ago, and for all their locations from Treasure Coast down to Homestead, and there were mostly Spanish meetings. So I brought this card out with me. We're going to have this card available on the new online store very soon. Also, we have a book, the Damage Prevention Guide, which has everything. And of course, we have it in English now. It had to be updated because there was a law change that took place back in July 2020. And we're working on the translation of that book to Spanish right now. So hopefully we'll have that within the next month or so. So wanted to tell you about that. Of course, at sunshine811.com, we do have a Spanish page as well, a Spanish section where you can go and read more information on there. For those folks that do want to sign up to use our online ticket entry system, there's new training that just got released, more in-depth training. Maybe you're someone that has been using the online ticket entry system now for some time, but maybe you want to take the new training. You can. It's open to anyone to take the training. So you would just log into that Corsetro system using that login that you had established. If you don't remember, call 811. We have a IT support area that can help you get logged in to take the new training. I want to talk about this, very important. It is mandatory for utility members or member operators to report damages to 811 at least once a year. We have to analyze that data and send it up to Tallahassee. So looking at the 2020 data, we don't have the 2021 available yet. That should be available soon. Having no locate ticket was the #1 identified root cause for damages here in Florida. And then on that 2020 damage data, the analysis also indicated that sewer, fencing, landscaping, irrigation, highest work types that resulted in damages, and landscaping and fencing work most likely to be done without locate ticket. So wanted to point that out. It's important, of course, to know about 811, follow the safe digging process, making sure that you're communicating and so forth. And this is a 6-step process that we talk about, and it's part of our practical solutions presentation. We take the information in the law, we put it in the method that you can follow. It's easy to follow, and it's important not to skip one of these steps. So I'll just go over all 6 of them. Prepare before you notify 811. So you got some digging to do as part of your project, and you're going to be digging within the next 30 days. So I know I need to notify 811. So gather all the necessary information that we will need to create what we call a locate ticket. And we put all that information on our website on what's needed for a locate ticket. Make sure that you also obtain a field contact person for that project, because their name is going to be put on their ticket as well as a phone number. White lining the area is so important, the dig site, because that really helps out the locators. And it should match the locate description. You're providing an address, but you're also describing what you're doing at that address. It's very important. Step 2 is to notify us. You can call 811, or as I mentioned, you can go online. And if you've taken the training, you can do a ticket online, or if you're just doing a single address only, you don't need to go through the training. You can do a single address ticket. So those are the 2 ways that you can notify 811. And then step 3 is you got to make sure that you allow enough time per what the law says as the statutory wait times, and allow enough time to notify 811. So if it's on dry land, we consider that a normal ticket, or you're going to be digging on dry land. Make sure that you provide at least 2 full business day notice, not including the day you notified 811, and also weekends and any holidays that were closed do not count in that wait time. If it's underwater, it's 10 full business day wait. Now, someone's wait time may be a little bit longer. Sometimes delays happen. Weather or other factors may cause a delay in the wait time. But just make sure that no one's digging during that waiting period, because it is actually a citable offense, but you want to allow the time for the utilities to do what they need to do on their end, and send out a locate technician if they have to the site to mark it. Step 4 is very important, is verifying. I mentioned how you checking responses or checking the status of a locate ticket. It is required that the law says that excavators have to verify, and checking positive response, and that's what we call it here in Florida. There's different ways of doing it, but you want to see if there's lines there at the site, if those lines are marked or not. But also utility may provide a code to you to maybe tell you that there's information that needs to be clarified or corrected, or maybe they're asking you to do something. So that's why it's important to verify. And this is before you start any digging. And then step 5 is protecting those marks, those temporary marks. The locators are marking with paint or flags, or a combination of both at the dig site. So those marks need to be protected. If they're no longer visible and you're working, or you're about to go work, make sure that you contact 811 as the law indicates for remarking. Contractors can document marks as well, document the white line, document the remarking, in case you need to refer back to that in case something were to go wrong. Step 6 is digging safely, being aware of what the tolerance zone is here in Florida. And I got a few slides and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But those are the 6 steps for successful operations and safer crews. I also want to mention that the color codes, APWA, the locate technicians need to use the appropriate color codes to identify what's underground. Go by the color of the marks that are above ground. Those marks are always approximate, but make sure that you follow the appropriate color codes as well. Those color codes we have out there in all of our resources. They're on our website as well. Verifying positive response. These are the different ways you can verify the responses to my ticket. You can call 811, hear them over the phone, option 5. We have a app replacement called sunshine811.com/app2, where you can utilize that and save that to go log in and verify responses. Or if you have access to the exact system, that is the best way to check responses, as I mentioned. Now, you may have the app from Sunshine 811. We used to have that for many years. If you downloaded the app from before, it should still work. However, anyone new that's going out to the iOS or Google store can no longer download the app that we used to have, because we've had some developer issues. So that's why we created this responsive website as an app replacement. So step 6, I mentioned digging safely in the area where those marks are at. That's considered a tolerance zone, and the state law does define the tolerance zone. It's 24 inches on either side of that line that's underground, that buried line, taking in consideration the width of that facility. So in that area, if you are going to be digging in that area, You got to do what the law indicates: hand dig, soft dig, vacuum excavate to expose the facility, potholing, using less invasive methods to protect that facility, keep you safe as well. Before bringing in the mechanized equipment, usually when we look at the damage data, we always see that the heavy equipment is the #1 cause when it comes to the damages and what caused the damage. So before bringing in the heavy equipment, using the less invasive methods. But if you do need to use a heavy equipment, make sure that you have a spotter checking what that machine operator is doing. So also alerting to, again, avoid contact or damage to any underground lines. And of course, as I mentioned, providing accurate, specific information on where you're digging is so important. So we talked about what happened at the Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport a few years ago, and you don't want to do the same thing. We don't want folks, making those mistakes. So provide a correct address, as much details as possible. But also, if you plan to move outside of the area that you described on your ticket, contact 811 again for a new ticket. If you plan to move outside of the areas that were described in white line, contact 811 again. Very important. And then low impact marking is also talked about in the state law. If you're working in several sections alongside a roadway, you can white line those and indicate that on your ticket, replacing poles, adding poles, that would help out the locator. Also, if you're working on a property and you're only working in certain sections, maybe doing a fence install, there's no point in having the whole property requested. Just white line those areas, indicate that on your ticket. This will help the locate technician out. They're able to mark the site and then move on to the next ticket. So in the law, low impact marking talks about as well, tickets should only cover what you can complete within the 30 calendar day period. And if the job is ongoing, make sure that you renew your ticket before it expires. And the ticket, you'll see an expiration date on there. So if you're going to the second month, renew your ticket, but you also update the locate description so completed areas are not marked again. And if you want to add new areas, as long as it meets the ticket parameter, you can do so. But this is going to help out the locate technicians. With the heavy ticket volumes that we're seeing, resources are being stretched thin. So anything you can do to help out the locators is appreciated. So they're able to mark active sites and able to mark it on time. So you don't see marks at the job site. Is it clear to dig? That's a good question. You don't know until you verify the status of your ticket. And seeing is believing. Verify at the job site before you dig. Make sure you're at the correct address as well. But you compare the positive response that you get from Sunshine 811 to what you see out there in the dig site. You compare them to the temporary marks, compare it to any permanent markers out there as well. This happened a few years ago in St. Petersburg, where a contractor notified 811 and they provided 54th Avenue South in St. Pete. And based upon that information, we notified 4 utility members, 2 of them marked it. However, the day that the project was starting, this is actually where they were digging. It was 54th Avenue North instead of South. So, however, this morning, the crew showed up here and they started digging. No one questioned anything. There was no marks there at the site, and they hit a gas pipeline. So luckily that pipeline did not ignite, but they had to close down the road, call 911. So all of that could have been avoided had they asked the questions of why, where's the ticket? What does positive response say? Maybe made a phone call to question, are we at the right address, and so forth. Some lines underground are privately owned and they're not going to get marked from an 811 ticket because the law does require, member operators to mark those lines that they own and maintain only. So it could be a line that was put in there by the property owner, okay, or it's considered a line that's responsibility of that property owner. So just be mindful of that as well. Sewer laterals or sewer lines connecting the home to this, the city or county line usually do not get located. That's an example of that. So contact the property owner for any privately owned utilities. And we have a list of private locate companies that are on our associate member page. So there's also associate members, that some of them are design companies or engineering companies, and others provide private locate or SUE work as well here in Florida. You can reach out to those folks if you need like a private locate, for example. So this is a recent gas line hit in the Central Florida area. First responders, of course, were at the scene. Of course, this is not the scene that we want to see here, but unfortunately it does happen. And I want to talk about this because there's been some enhanced civil fines that were added, were signed off by our governor and effective July 1st of 2020. So they are $2,500 fines when digging near a PHMSA regulated line. What is PHMSA? That stands for the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. They're part of the federal DOT, and they regulate these lines. They could be high pressure lines, and I have a slide talking more about them in a little bit. But this $2,500 versus a $500 fine, which we've had in our law and applies for almost all utilities. This is a much higher fine, and it applies to any of those 5 that you see there on that slide. Not notifying 811 before excavation or demolition, and you have one of these lines that's in conflict on your site. Digging before the response is received or time frame expires. Not using caution when you're digging in the tolerance zone area. Not stopping when marks are destroyed, and not stopping the work when the facility has been contacted or damaged. Also, back in July 2020, as part of the changes in the law, we have a new second-degree misdemeanor, and everything mostly is civil offenses, but we have 2 that are second-degree misdemeanors that are criminal, and it's removing or damaging a permanent marker placed to identify the approximate location of an underground facility. So in that first picture there on the slide is examples of permanent markers. They may tell you that there's a critical fiber line, a power line, or maybe a pipeline marker that it's in the area. There's a line underground in the area. And they have important information on them, like the owner of that line, their phone number. You may see the 811 logo on there, but these lines do not need to be tampered with, or you cannot be removing now. They're protected under our state law. So it's a second-degree misdemeanor. Now, why was this added? Because somewhere in Florida, they were removing these permanent markers for whatever reason. So they had to put this in our law. And then the second one is removing or damaging valid temporary locate marks. Those temporary marks that are placed there because of an 811 ticket, they're also protected as well. Knowingly and willfully removing those temporary marks is a second-degree misdemeanor. But that's been in our law since 2010. But the one about permanent markers was just added in 2020. So here's all the violations. The $500 ones, which have been in our law, they apply to basically all utilities underground. And then the 2,500 pertain to those high pressure lines, and they were just added. Now, a little bit more about these high priority subsurface installation. Not all gas lines are considered HPSIs, okay? These are by transmission, or these are distribution. They could be a distribution main line for the gas company, but they transport petroleum products, hazardous liquids, or highly volatile liquids, such as carbon dioxide or anhydrous ammonia. The pipeline owners or operators determine whether that pipeline is HPSI. So if you're digging and you have one of these lines that's within 15 feet per what the law says, that pipeline owner has to mark it, and they use a code in positive response called 2C marked with exceptions, HPSI in conflict. So the excavator must notify the pipeline operator of start date and time. And the reason is because they're going to want to be there to supervise the work, make sure that everyone stays safe, and also keep the community safe. So that's why these lines are very critical, and that's why the fines are much higher. Now, we've had 2 incidents here in Florida that have caused this increase in fines. And The Florida Natural Gas Association has lobbied for higher fines. So they went through Tallahassee for that, and it got approved, or got approved by the lawmakers there in Tallahassee. So that's why we're looking at these enhanced civil fines. Again, it's add another layer of protection for these critical lines underground. So the law also indicates what's an HPSI incident. It could be an incident involving death or serious bodily injury requiring inpatient hospitalization, or property damage, including service restoration costs in excess of $50,000, or interruption of service to 2,500 or more customers. So when there is an HPSI incident, because of that law change, now the fire marshal can be brought into the picture. There's an incident report that can be done to alert the fire marshal. That incident report is being worked in the process right now, but once the fire marshal is brought into the picture, they can bring in, it could be a fire chief as well, but they can bring in their agents and investigate if they feel that after the investigation that someone did violate the law. Then they're looking at potential $50,000 fine, and that's separate from the $2,500 civil citation, and it's separate from any recovery fees. So what happens if I hit something underground? Don't cover it back up and try to hide it, leave the scene. You got to stop any and all excavations that may cause further damage. You got to report it to that utility. If that line break causes hazardous material to escape, the law says you have to evacuate the area, call 911, contact the facility owner. We got to get that owner of the line, a representative, to go out there to the scene. They have response times, usually within an hour, to go out there and do what they need to do, close valves and so forth. Okay, they do add mercaptan to these lines, usually at the distribution level, and it's a rotten egg smell to alert you. So you smell that rotten egg smell, you hear hissing, vegetation dying, and that's one of those. And you struck the line, you got to, again, evacuate the area, try not to operate machinery, turn it on, because that could cause a spark, phones and so forth, and run upwind as well. So all that information we have on our website, we have on our damage prevention guide as well. And you can also go to the PHMSA website to get information about that as well, and what you need to do in case a line, one of these HPSI lines are damaged or struck. So I wanted to show you the infographics that are out there at our Safe Digging Month Toolkit page, and these are some that you can utilize to help get the word out on safe digging. Safe digging is very important. Of course, it's about making sure that people stay safe, going home safely at the end of the day, protecting our vital infrastructure that's underground. More things are underground now. More people keep moving to Florida. So that's going to create a need, for more housing. Companies keep moving to Florida, so we need to start building more. There's a construction work, road work, and all that is a part of it. Folks digging, doing landscape work, installing trees, taking out trees, that's not going to stop. So that's why it's important to make sure that you know about 811. I encourage you to take a look at the law. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I've been providing a lot of education lately, and seeing folks again, some face-to-face. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the time this afternoon to be able to provide this update to all the members here today. My contact information is on that slide, so feel free to give me a call. I don't know if there's time to have any questions or not.
Go ahead. Hey, John. Yeah, very good. Yes, we got a couple questions, and we got a couple moments to cover them. First of all, very good. Thank you. Great presentation. It's no surprise that people are hitting things buried below ground, and especially anybody that's reviewed plans here in South Florida realize the great scramble there is for open green space, and we as landscapers and tree huggers look to put trees in there, but every utility in the world and everybody else has other plans for those. So it's getting tighter and tighter, and down the road that that space and those incidents of the two colliding and hitting are just going to be more and more. So it's almost a surprise that you have to work as hard as you do to notify people to please make a free call and in essence get free insurance, that they're not going to create a problem. It's kind of bizarre to me, but yeah, it's the prevalent way. They just still don't. I was glad to hear you say about this, what the hand digging or soft digging. We were often told, oh no, my crew is only soft digging, or they're using shovels, they don't have to call. And so it was good for you to reinforce that, because indeed they do. You can do enough damage with the shovel, maybe not as much as with the backhoe, but you can do a lot of damage with that as well.
Yes.
I was glad to hear that. My question, John, if they're at a site, be it a large construction site or not, and there are multiple contractors there, do all the contractors need to call in separate tickets?
Yes, well, we do recommend that they contact 811 and get a ticket for the work that they're doing, just as the law indicates. There are cases, though, here in Florida where we do allow, if a general contractor wants to add a subcontractor on the ticket, they can in the remarks area of the ticket. However, that general contractor takes on that full responsibility and any potential liability, by adding a sub. But they have to indicate the name of the sub, but they also have to make sure that they're following through and providing responses to that sub. But we do allow that. However, because many times that general contractors is not following through, that's why we say at all of our meetings, even if you're a subcontractor, please contact 811, get your own ticket, and also follow the safe digging process. That way, you as a company are following through and also checking responses, because what you could be doing could be different from what another contractor is doing, and also what the general contractor is doing as well. And we don't want folks making assumptions. That video that we showed about Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, assumptions were made that the general contractor had me on their ticket type of thing. And that was not the case. So we don't want that type of thing to avoid an incident from happening.
So the way it works then, John, if somebody calls in, the first person that calls in, be it a GC, and maybe not GC, say there's a swimming pool going in and there's multiple people that are going to be impacted. So the person excavating the swimming pool makes the call to 811. We come out as a landscaper and say, hey, it's already marked. And we hit something as the landscaper. Are we covered because the area was marked?
No, because the first question, especially if law enforcement is brought into the picture, is that law enforcement officer that hopefully would have knowledge of Chapter 556 would question where is the locate ticket, what is the locate ticket number. They can always call and verify that information, speak directly with our representatives in our member services department, and if their name is not on the ticket, okay, and that's where you could be having some issues there. You can be cited at that point, by that law enforcement officer. But worst of all, you may, when it comes to the claim issue, we don't like to get involved in that. You may be having to deal with that as well. So in that type of scenario, please, that landscape contractor, have your own locate ticket with your name, with the work that you're doing.
So indeed, that is the way it works. In order to be in any way covered, you have
Yes.
to have a ticket number.
Yes, that is correct. And make sure that's a valid ticket. And again, it's for work that's going to be done within a 30-day calendar period. So make sure it's a valid ticket, because that, like as I mentioned, now I mentioned about these higher fines, that got added to the law. Enforcement here in Florida, some years are higher than others, but here in Broward County, in the city of Fort Lauderdale, there is a police officer with the Special Operations Environmental Unit, City of Fort Lauderdale Police Department, that has been actively enforcing Chapter 556, 811. And just last year, he wrote up 50 citations in the city of Fort Lauderdale. And we only had 60. We had 60 total for the whole state. So only 50 came from city of Fort Lauderdale. The year prior, he had 58. So we do, enforcement needs to be ramped up, and some cities are looking right now to concentrate on this because of the damages, the amount of damages that they experience. So, it's important to have your locate ticket, have that available, have a ticket number or something you can show in case someone were to do a courtesy stop, or someone gets alerted, and they may call someone to come up to the site and ask the questions. If you have your locate ticket, or especially if a damage occurs, have your locate ticket. If you've done the right thing, that's going to help you in that case, in case it turns into a claim.
So John, on that, where multiple people are calling for a property, if we're the second person in, or somebody, one of our contractors out the second person in, the area is already marked, they call in, are they notified by whoever they reach out to, say the area is marked and now you're covered via this ticket? Or you still, you don't have to allow 2 days since it's already marked, they're not going to come out and remark it. How does that work if you're the second one at
Yeah.
the site?
It could be an indication where if the area is marked, that would be up to the locate technician, and they can provide those comments back to the excavator that the area is marked, and they don't need to add any additional marks on there. That's why it's important to verify the responses, from the locator, from the utility, because that could be the case. Still have your ticket, but that could be the case in that situation.
Excellent, excellent. All right, sir, I really appreciate it very much. The information's wonderful.
Sure.
I certainly hope, do you have something, Kevin?
No,
Oh, I
that was
saw you waving
really
in.
great stuff. And again, I thank you for jumping in here.
Sure.
Donna is sending some stuff.
Yeah,
too.
we'll get it. All right, well, thank you. And we encourage everybody, those of you that work with cities, we used to demand it. I don't know that did any more good than not, but it is a must do before any date. John, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Okay, to the general membership, just a couple quick things. One, somebody called in from a phone number. So the system did,
right now.
okay, I'm still going to use it as an example. Because the system didn't recognize it, all we had on there was a phone number. And due to a recent fun adventure I had the other day, I don't take those chances anymore. Normally we would just admit them, but we don't want to admit someone that doesn't belong there. I will tell you this, and hopefully you all don't suffer the same thing. I was 6 months ago, we had our 50-year grade school reunion. Not many people have that, but my grade school did, and it was a lot of fun, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the other day, from the group that started that, I got a notice saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry to say, to that group, look who died." Well, I'm like, oh no. I started clicking, and it asked, sign on to Messenger to see who died. I signed on to Messenger, and I was hacked immediately. So anybody that knows me probably got a notice that I sent something out. But be careful, they're out there. And I thought it was a super creative way to do it. They had my heartstrings going because I'm wondering what classmate passed on, and the whole time they were fishing, and they hooked a big one. So be careful of that. But for that same reason, when only a phone number shows up on our board, we're not going to admit you into the meeting. So make sure you're using, what would that be, Richard? The number that they sign up on? How does the system know?
Well,
If it's Zoom, it's their name.
yeah.
Okay.
It'll be their name.
Okay, and if they come through, that should be the name. All right, so sorry to whoever we didn't admit, if you were indeed due there, but it's got to have a name.
So Donna is co-hosting.
Go
Donna,
ahead.
you could jump in now here if you'd like to.
Please.
Hello.
Hi, Donna.
Hello,
Hello.
You're out in the
Sitting in.
woods.
Sitting in for Mike today.
Not a problem.
Gotta go. You got 4 whole minutes. So this is a minute with Mike via dial.
Well, you know what? I am not gonna take that long. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Do I have something in front of it? How's that? Better?
Perfect.
Okay. So I put 3 links in the chat. One is for this document that I'm just gonna go over really quickly. Second one is a blog that I wrote about how to make a forest, which I think you guys might find interesting. And then the third one is a link to our Eventbrite page. We're collaborating with the Miami-Dade County Extension and the Palm Beach County Extension in a program called Lunch and Learn, and it's called Landscapes. They are a changing, and we are the change. We have 4 more to go, so I think you all might find some of those interesting, and they offer CEUs for LIAF. So if you want 4 LIAF CEUs, sign up for them. They're free, unless you want CEUs, and then it's $10. So anyway, that being said, we'll dive into this new grades and standards. The last one was from 2015, so it's been a while. Like I said, there's not a whole lot that's different. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. It says drag to another screen to share. I don't know why. Okay. It's a little easier to read. I don't know if you noticed that. It's a little bigger. The main difference, and I'm just going to scroll down to it because I know everybody wants to go on time, has to do with Mike's favorite topic, circling roots. Okay. So the new language, and this is in the link I sent you, has all his notations on it, and you can feel free to make some comments and send it back to him if you want. But the presence of a circling root is not a downgrade when 3 or more non-circling structural roots are growing higher in the substrate profile. Over the circling root. These non-circling structural roots do not need to be equally spaced around the trunk. Okay, we'll look at a picture of it in a little bit. So that is a big change there. And then this one is small maturing trees. They kind of give them some wiggle room. And we'll talk about that too down through the thing. So here's the new structural root diagram. You can see the circling roots under it.
Donna, we're not seeing
No,
that picture now. We were seeing the steps, but we're not seeing the picture you're sharing.
You're not?
Nope.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can put this back here. How about now?
No.
Okay, well,
Same one you had before.
that's weird. It knocked me out somewhat for some reason. Let me try doing it again.
There you go.
Now we're talking.
Still?
No,
No,
we
you
got
got
it
it.
now. There it is.
Okay, great. All right. So you see how this root is going underneath the structural roots? So that would not be considered a call. I guess previously it would have been if you were doing, some of those air root exposer machines and saw one of those, you might be tempted. But if it's above the structural roots, then it is a call, of course, obviously, unless you cut that root and fix it. Okay, so that's a major change.
Donna, before you skip out on that, that portion makes sense about the above and below to a degree. What they kind of slipped in there was that shown in the picture are kind of 3 equally spaced roots that are left. They said in there, those roots do not have to be equally spaced. So in
Right.
essence, all 3 of them could be coming out in a very narrow portion. I don't know how that fit in there, because that certainly leaves an unbalanced tree.
Well, we can't always predict where where those roots are gonna come out and make the trunk flare. But I mean, in this picture, it almost looks like it's on one side to me. But yeah, I mean,
The issue I'd be concerned with, and I'm walking toward the screen because I was going to touch it, I guess that won't work. Where a circling root will prevent growth of roots from that side. Think of a gumbo limbo, it happens all the time.
so right here, you're saying that this root here is going to prevent it from going out that way.
Right, so if the
Uh-huh.
3 roots shown in the picture are grown within a 45-degree angle of each other, so they're all tight on one side, and there is a circling root on the other, it's going to prevent roots from coming out on that opposite side. So that tree is going to be really unstable.
Well, I mean, maybe, maybe not, but the difference is it's not going to constrict those structural roots like the one on the right-hand side that's going over it. Of course, as it grows, it's going to choke out some of
Right.
those. And that is not, so they're making some allowance for that.
Right.
Okay. And they're making an allowance for it not being completely, around it. And this, you can see this one is basically on one side. And here's the one where it is on top of the structural roots. So,
Mhm.
so that's one of the major changes. And then another one of the major, really, like he said, it's not a whole lot. This is new. The designation for container size, like number 15, number 25, can be substituted for like 20 gallon, 30 gallon volume sizes. And then this is interesting language. The grades and standards are not intended to be used, they have to fix that, as specifications for specific jobs or contracts. That's kind of weird, right? I thought it was. Minimum height. Minimum heights and or spreads used in this document represent the size of a quality plant. They do not represent actual plants available at any given time of year or any given market, as plant sizes available at any given time vary based on supply and demand. So they're giving some wiggle room to the growers, I guess. I'm not really sure what all that means.
We can't find half the stuff that we're being required to put in at that size, and it's going to grow, but at the risk of being blunt, cities are like, yeah, but it says I got to have 24 inches and leaves touching, when you can't find a 24-inch green island ficus anywhere. I'll pay you $1,000 if you can.
I guess that's why they put it in there, because it is so hard to find quality material and of good size. So they're not intended to be used as specifications for specific jobs or contracts.
The problem with that, as an ex-city person, I'm not talking directly, Kevin, but I will look at Kevin.
No,
The problem is,
That's what we're here for.
if you put that bid out, so, Nannix won the bid for 24-inch green island ficus, and you charge them $1,000 a piece, because that's what you had to pay. And they go in, you say, citing this portion, I'm only gonna put in a 10-inch. And we have to admit it. You beat out the competitors on level playing field, because we are not allowed to enforce that portion of the contract.
except that's completely contrary to what human nature would do. Nobody prices a thing higher than the thing that they could get for less.
So if you bid it, knowing that you were gonna put in the 10, bid it at $5, and somebody else who said, I'm going by the contract, bid it at 50 or 100, they lost the contract, yet you get to put in the material.
I don't know.
So it's
I don't
not,
know.
it's not a level playing field.
I can see that point.
We're done. We'll argue this.
Well, like I said, you can make comments and send that
We're over
document right
time,
back
yes.
to them.
Go ahead, Brian, if you don't mind, finish it up, Donna. We are over.
Yes, I am. So in multi-trunk, small maturing trees should not be downgraded if they are shorter than the minimum height in the matrix. And I think that's something good, because the reason you plant them is because they are small, and most people don't really want them to get that big anyway. But so that's new. And that's it, I
That's
think.
very open. That's very new and very open.
Very open.
Just should not be a downgrade. So,
Mm-hmm.
oh, man.
Okay. So there you have it, my friends. That's all the news that's fit to print.
Thank you, Donna. You left us with
I love it.
heart palpitations, but that's okay.
Well, you have the document, you can click on it, that link, and you can, like I said, make comments to Mike about it. And you guys can have some fun with it.
And we have 5 to 7 years, because it is ruled now. That's why LIAF and other groups were in earlier commenting. So as you pointed out, Donna, why correctly, so this is what's in effect. We're talking about it so everybody's aware of it, but this is the law.
That's right. Not much we can do about it at this point. So anyway, guys, it was a good
Thank you,
meeting.
Donna.
Thank you for letting me share. Check out those links, and I'll see you next month.
We will cover this in more depth last month. Excellent.
Okay.
All right, to everybody else, thank you very much. One last announcement real quick as we come into the summer. We're going to continue with the Zoom meetings. We're going to have the summer light sessions where we normally would go out to different places. We had our summer road trips in the past. We're going to continue with the Zoom meetings for a while. What we are going to do, though, is I am going to shorten them. So as opposed to the 2-hour spans, we're going to be close to an hour and 15 to maybe an hour and a half so you guys can get back out quicker. So look forward to shorter Zoom style meetings over the next couple months. Any questions, please go on the website. That's the best way to reach us. All right, everybody have a great month. Stay safe, call 811. Please read these rules and plant chestnuts when you're up north. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.